Brother Lang will not be with us here on Sunday. Rescheduled for Sunday, November 7th. Guess what happened? He got the dreaded COVID. So you're going to have to get better. So pray for Brother Lang. Amen. That's the reason why he's not going to be with us. He got tested. He must not have been feeling too good, and he got a test, and he had it. So there's a lot of that stuff around there. I guess in the paper today it said half the firemen. So if you need an ambulance call, guess what? Either walk or get somebody to take you, because I mean most of the firemen got COVID. That's what's going on right now. So that's kind of what's happening anyway. So be careful out there. Amen. Right? We don't want to see anybody get sick. You got that, Josh? You should be okay though, right? You're probably better off having to be done with it, right? There you go. You don't know what strain you had there, and they don't tell you stuff like that, do they? It's all COVID, right? Anyway, let's go to chapter 6, starting at verse 1. My son, if thou be surety for thy friend, if thou hast stricken thy hand with a stranger, thou art snared with the words of thy mouth. Art thou taken with the words of thy mouth? Do this now, my son, and deliver thyself when thou art come into the hand of thy friend. Go, humble thyself, and make sure thy friend. Give not sleep to thine eyes, nor slumber to thine eyelids. Deliver thyself as a roe from the hand of the hunter, and as a bird from the hand of the fowler. So that talks about being surety, and then we're going to look at observing an ant, verse 6. So my title of my message is really financial prudence. So we're looking at finances. First off, don't be a cosigner, and second, how about this? Get it the old-fashioned way. Work. That's what you see. Anyway, verse 6 says, Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways, and be wise, which have no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou arise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands, a folding of the hands to sleep, so shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and that want as an armed man. Let's pray. Father, I just pray for this time, and Lord, I just pray that this message would be an encouragement to us and a warning, really, of some things to stay away from and some things to do. Lord, I just pray for that as we look at the book of Proverbs, that Father, we'd accept your wisdom and not on to our own understanding, Lord. I just pray for that in Jesus' name. Amen. So let me just read the part about the surety. Surety is being a cosigner in a loan, basically. That would be our example of that today. Another example that we see would be somebody that takes something down to a pawn shop. Basically, what you would do is you would take something of value and you would leave it there, like in the Bible times, as a pledge that you're going to pay back the money. You go to the pawn shop, they figure this thing's worth X amount, pay you, let's say $10, and then if you don't come back and buy it back, and pay it with interest, guess what? Then they'll probably sell it for $100. That's how they work. That's how they're going to make their money. If you don't, they just soon probably not have you come back and pay for it, which I believe a lot of times, if you're in that kind of a situation, you're not going to, who's going to say the ship's going to come in so you'll be able to pay for it? But anyway, my son, if thou be surety for thy friend. And this again is Solomon's warnings to his son, is what we see here. My son, if thou be surety for thy friend, if thou hast stricken thy hand with a stranger, thou art snared with the words of thy mouth. Thou art taken with the words of thy mouth. Do this now. In other words, what he's saying is, if you've done this, you need to quickly go back to your friend and try to get out of this thing. Do this now, my son. Deliver thyself when thou art come into the hand of thy friend, so humble thyself and make sure thy friend. That's a good way to lose a friend, is to be involved in his finances. I would not recommend being involved in somebody else's finances. I'm not saying it's necessarily sin or necessarily wrong. It's just not wise. Just take my word for it. That's what God says here. And I mean, I've done foolish things, and you don't really want to do that. Give not sleep to thine eyes, nor slumber to thine eyelids. Deliver thyself as a roe from the hand of the hunter. Here you got a picture of somebody hunting a female deer here, and boom, it'd be just like, that deer is ready to get pounced on, or a bird from the hand of the fowler, ready to go into the trap. So we see in verse 1, my son, if thou be surety for thy friend, if thou hast stricken the hand of a stranger. Surety for a friend, this would be what we have today as co-signing for a loan. It's not a good practice to be involved in somebody else's finances. I'm going to tell you that right now. If it be your own family, your child, or something, I'd probably think different on that. But again, I'm going to say this: if you do not have the money to pay, do not co-sign for that loan. If you go into that thing needing that money, and if they default and you have to end up paying for it. By the way, I have done that before. I've co-signed for a friend, and I ended up paying for it. And by the way, just like the Bible says, when it was all said and done, I paid for it, but it wasn't mine. That's what you're looking at. And if you don't have the money to pay that, I highly would recommend not to do that. And I would recommend not to do that because it is a good way to lose your friend. There's a lot of times reasons why we might co-sign, but I would not recommend it. If your friend defaults on the debt, the person that is surety is obligated to pay the debt. See, you are saying you're surety. What you're saying is you are actually making a pledge. You're making a vow that if he doesn't pay, I'm paying. You go down and sign your name on the dotted line as a cosigner. That's what it is. You are saying, I will pay. You are actually making a vow to God. And if you don't pay that, you're putting God's name to your lie, is what you're really doing. And so, I mean, obviously, I believe it's making that debt your debt. So again, a person that is surety is obligated to pay the debt. If thou hast stricken thy hand with a stranger, if thou hast, stricken thy hand with a stranger, it's making an agreement with a stranger. I mean, obviously, you don't want to get into deals with strangers, with people you don't know. And it'd be kind of like a handshake on it. Again, don't do that with a stranger. Don't do that with a stranger. And here the stranger, I believe, would be the loan officer. You are agreeing with that loan officer that I'm going to pay. That's what you're doing. If thou hast stricken thy hand with a stranger, the stranger here would be the loan officer. The agreement here we see in this particular section has already been made. That's what Solomon's telling his son. Son, if you've done this, you need to humble yourself, go down there, and you need to try to get out of this thing, is what you need to try to do, because I'll tell you what, you're going to lose your friend. The one that is surety for his friend is trapped. There is a strong possibility that the one that is surety could end up losing his own property. The Bible talks about in another place, we're going to look at some of the places in the book of Proverbs that talk about becoming surety for somebody else. You could lose the bed that you sleep in, is what we're going to see. So don't co-sign loans, is what I'm saying. Don't do it. And a lot of times, why would a person need a co-signer? There's probably two reasons why a person would need a co-signer. Age is the first one. Yeah, age is the first one. He has established no credit. Again, I'll be honest with you, I co-signed for Jared when he bought a house in Pender because it was a bank loan. It was such and such a thing, and I mean, I didn't have any problem with that. But I mean, the thing about it is, if he didn't pay, I was obligated to pay. That's what I'm saying. But see, I had to put up collateral and stuff like that too. So I'm putting up a pledge that, it's not just on my signature. He didn't have anything at that time. So, I mean, see, I could sign because I had collateral and stuff like that. So, basically the number one is you need a cosigner if you don't own anything or if you don't have any credit. And so that'd be the second reason. And, a lot of times people need a cosigner because they have already defaulted somewhat. I'll be honest with you, the time I co-signed for somebody, he had already not been making payments. Guess what? I was about as dumb as a hoe handle. You know what I'm saying? For doing that, why would I do something like that? It was stupid. Let me tell you something right now. Somebody that's that dishonest with and not paying his bill, what would ever make me think that he's going to pay that? But I'll tell you one thing, later on, somebody asked me about borrowing some money to him one time, and I knew his dad. And I'll tell you what, I mean, I knew that he had borrowed money from his dad and hadn't paid his dad. And I'm looking at him, he's asking me this, and I'm thinking, if he's not going to pay his dad back, do you honestly think he's going to pay me back? So I just told him a simple 2-lettered word. Does anybody know what that word was? No, I'm not going to co-sign for it. Again, I don't think it, to tell you the truth is, I don't think it would be a good practice, even if the person you think was honest. I do not believe it's good practice. That's a good way to lose a friend. Somebody can get into trouble, so on and so forth. Don't do it. It's like I said before, I don't necessarily believe it's a sin. You understand what I'm saying? But I don't believe it's wise, because you're setting yourself up to lose, and it could cost you more than you really want to pay. Thou art snared with the words of thy mouth. It's not wise. Thou art snared with the words of thy mouth. We agreed to do it. So you said, yes, I'll do it. And, ooh. Why do you think you might go ahead and do it anyway? How could you be snared with the words of your mouth? My questions aren't that good. I know they're hard to answer. Sometimes what my trend of thought is, I think sometimes we can, it can make us feel good to think that, I can be a co-signer because I can handle my money better than him. This other person, he's proven himself not to be. And see, I can be the co-signer. Well, I'll tell you what, you can be the co-signer and be awful real proud of that. But I'll tell you something right now, that pride's going to be gone soon when you've lost and they're not paying. You're trapping yourself with the words of your mouth. Don't agree to do it. No matter how much it might make you feel good, and you might actually think you're helping him out. Are we always helping somebody out to go into debt? No, you're not really helping somebody out. A lot of times we can be enabling them, can't we really? We can be enabling. We got to be careful of those things. We really do. Again, God's advice to you is not to be surety. That's what God's advice to you is. That's what Solomon's advice to his son is. That's what God's advice to all of us is. Don't be surety. It is not wise. It is not prudent. What is prudence? It's you deliberate, you stop and think before you say yes. And so, a lot of times for me, I guarantee when I co-signed and had to pay, that was not prudent. That was not wise. That was absolute foolishness is what it really was. But, I tell you what, I paid for it. When I was done, it wasn't mine. But I paid for what I said I'd pay for. Don't enter into these kind of agreements. You may have to sell things you own in order to pay the debt. That's what it might be. So, if the thing about it is, if you cannot afford it, obviously you are way over the top. If you can't actually make payments that he says he's going to make. So don't push yourself. Say no. Say no. Learn to say no real quick. Again, be not, this is Proverbs chapter 22, verses 26 and 27. It says, be not one of them that strike hands, or them that are sureties for debts. If thou hast nothing to pay, why should he take away thy bed from under thee? Like the Bible says here, you're going to lose the very place you sleep. You could be a surety for somebody else, and you really don't have that money, and you could lose out your own bed. Why should he take away thy bed from under thee? It is not necessarily wrong to be a cosigner on a note, but it's a good way to end a friendship. And that's what we see there, verse 3 of the passage that we're on, chapter Proverbs 6, verse 3. Do this now, my son, deliver thyself. When thou art come into the hand of thy friend, go and humble thyself and make sure thy friend. You know, maybe it's like at this point, maybe he has not actually, he just said that he would co-sign. He said that he would co-sign, but it maybe hasn't happened yet. Go to him and say, I can't do it. I tell you what, humble yourself, even though, he might think you're some kind of a scoundrel, whatever. It doesn't really make any difference what he thinks. I'll tell you what, it's going to lose a friendship a lot quicker when he doesn't pay. So it's a lot better to say no. By the way, the person that I said no to be quite honest with you, he still talked to me after that. He just said, well, I'll just put it on my credit card. And I said, you are stupid. I told him that you're stupid. You're going to pay 20-some% interest. You're just plain stupid. And it's for something that he wanted. It was for a computer. And I'll tell you the truth is, I had given him my computer, the first computer I ever had. I gave it to him, and I had just bought a new computer, and I had just given him that computer. Now, it wasn't the top of the line. You know me, I don't have the top of the line. But you know what? He said, what he told me is, I want the best computer that's out there. Well, I'll tell you what, you are stupid for wanting the best computer out there when you don't even have the money to pay for it. He wasn't financially savvy. And if I would have just gave that to him, number one, I would have never gotten paid back. So it would have been just a gift. And plus, what would he have ever learned from that? Would that really have done him any good? This has been over 20 years ago, folks. That computer that he had to have the top of the line I'm sure it's in some landfill or it's made into a different computer. It's not there anymore. It's all, that stuff goes real quick. And back then, that computer was like $2,000 some dollars. I don't know what they cost today, but they were still pretty high for the top of the line. That was a lot of money. But he didn't really, he would have never paid for it. I can guarantee you that. Again, like I said, it's not necessarily wrong to co-sign for a note, but it's a good way to end a friendship. And the same way with borrowing money. I'm going to say that borrowing money isn't in here, but and expecting it to get back, you're doing about the same thing, really. You really are. And I'll tell you what, you're going to end up losing a friend. I remember borrowing a friend when I was in the Marine Corps, $500 to make a down payment on a car. But back then, the car was like $3,600. You could buy a brand new car for. And I'll tell you what, I remember the first month that I got paid, he was supposed to pay me $100 a month. The first month, I got $100. The next month, he gave me $100. Then he started belly aching about how much he was short and so on. So I gave him $80 back. And I never got another dime from him after that. That's just the way I tell you. It's a good way to lose a friend, is what I'm saying. It's a very good way to lose a friend. Which I'm saying for myself, I didn't ever hold it against him. But I mean, that's been 45, 46 years ago. That'd been 1974, whatever, how many years ago that is, because it was a 74 Plymouth that he bought. But anyway, that's the way she goes. It's not necessarily wrong to be a co-signer, but it's a good way to end a friendship. When the friend defaults and you have to keep the vow and pay the debt, that's what you have to do. That's what God would have you to do. Because if you're not good when you sign your name on there, I tell you what, you're vowing to pay that. Solomon is telling his son, who is obviously an adult, that if he has become surety for his friend, he needs to humble himself so he will make sure thy friend. Notice the last part of verse 3, and make sure thy friend. Humble thyself. I'm going to tell you something right now. It's after you've said yes. it's going to be a whole lot harder to say no. It's going to be a lot harder to say no. Because I mean, there probably is some kind of a sense of, boy, I tell you what, I'm helping him out. I feel good about that, and now you're probably going to actually feel bad about humbling yourself. It's going to be humbling because you're saying, no, I can't do what I said I'd do. It's going to be humbling to do that. The best thing is to do is say no right to start with. The humbling would be the acknowledgement that you regret co-signing that note, and how can you get your name off that your friendship can remain intact, or get that somehow or another that you can find somebody else or whatever it would be, but you want to release yourself from that obligation. A lot of times there can be pride in co-signing, and I'm going to get into that in a minute. Thou art snared with the words of thy mouth, thou art taken with the words of thy mouth. This verse indicates that there was boasting. There could be boasting, and oh yeah, I can do that. Yeah, man, and then you feel kind of, even so, you can actually feel kind of superior to the other person that has financial problems. But that's foolish in itself anyway. But we're foolish people sometimes, and we can think we're really something. He can't be looked at on financially savvy. The person that has the ability, I can co-sign that. You can feel good about that and think, boy, you can kind of feel superior. Yeah, the kind of a high roller type individual and a big shot, superior to the one that needs a co-signer because he can't get credit on his own signature. So you can kind of feel like you're a little better than him because I can co-sign. I tell you what, that is plain foolish thinking. I'm telling you that right now. It's foolish. But a lot of times we do think foolish things. He doesn't have the collateral or a pledge. He doesn't have the collateral, and so to make the pledge, he doesn't have that. Proverbs chapter 27, verse 13 says, take his garment that is surety for a stranger. It's kind of like Judah did. Remember how he took that pledge and so on and so forth? I'm not going to get all the story with that, but that's what it was. You're giving a pledge that you're going to pay and return and so on and so forth. And take his garment that is surety for a stranger. And, then remember, whose are these type of a thing? Oh boy. Take his garment that is surety for a stranger and take a pledge of him for a strange woman. So we can see that, again, you're leaving something there with the idea that you're going to pay. That's what you're doing. And by the way, back in these days, garments were of value. They were passed from generation to generation. I'll give them the shirt off your back type thing. I'll give you some of my clothes as a pledge that I'm going to pay this debt because those clothes were valuable. Remember when Samson went and he got so many changes of garment and so on and so forth. It was because they really were valuable. A pledge is like a pawn shop. What a pawn shop does, you bring in something of value and the pawn man holds it until you pay him back with interest. Take his garment that is surety for a stranger. Today, you may have to put up a title of a vehicle or a lien on some property. Like let's say, for instance, if I wanted to borrow some money today, I'd have to put a lien on something that I own. Or if I got a decent enough vehicle that's worth something, I can bring my title down there, and they figure it's worth so much value, and the bank's going to hold the title until I pay the note. That's like a pledge. That's what it is. That'd be that's what a pawn shop does, basically. Garments in Bible times were part of a man's wealth and were even passed on from generation to generation. A pledge would have been something of value. Thou art snared with the words of thy mouth. Thou art taken with the words of thy mouth. Our words can get us into trouble. Proverbs 17, verse 18, a man void of understanding striketh hands. And here we see in our text was with a stranger. You're making an agreement with somebody that you don't even know is what you're doing. And becometh surety in the presence of his friend. See, becometh surety in the presence of his friend. He has an idea of, hey, look at me, see what I am. You can have a pride, see, look what I can do, type of a thing. And that's how our words can be trapped. Once you say yes, and you feel so good about it, it's going to be hard to say, oh boy, I wish I never would have done that. Because I'll tell you what, my experience is this. I'm going to tell you right now, if somebody has financial problems, I'm not talking about a young person. I'm not talking like Jared. I mean, he never, he didn't have nothing. He's just a kid. That's it. But I tell you what, you got somebody that's 40 years old. I'm going to tell you something right now. He ought to be established enough. He ought to have his own job, have his own money. If he can't pay for it, he ought to save it until he can pay for it. That's my experience. I think it's better doing it that way than throwing stuff out there, because you're going to be the person, if you co-sign that thing, you're going to be the person that's going to be paying. I'm going to tell you that right now. I know you can have a good heart. You can do it for good heart reasons. But I'm going to tell you something right now. You can do it, but what's going to happen is you really never taught that person anything. Did you really help that person to ask you for that to co-sign? No, I'll tell you what, honestly, you didn't, because he didn't pay for it, and he didn't learn one thing other than he just doesn't have any sense of responsibility to pay you. I'm going to tell you what, that's the way people are. If somebody doesn't pay their bills and they need a co-signer, I'm going to tell you right now, you can't trust them. If they haven't been paying their loan regularly, why would I think they're going to pay for it once I sign my name? I'm stupid enough to put my name on there, which I was, I'm telling you. And I paid for it. I mean, that's just the way it is. I mean, I don't, lose any sleep over it or anything like that. But I'll tell you what, it really caused a real problem with my psyche as far as hatred is concerned. And the biggest problem was that person made a fool out of me. No, I'll tell you what, I was a fool to ever sign to start with. He didn't make a fool out of me. I already was a fool. That's what it boils down to. Don't do it. You're not doing him any favors. You're not keeping a friend. You're losing. If he was a friend, you've lost him. I guarantee you've lost him as a friend. Again, Proverbs 17, verse 18, a man void of understanding striketh hands and becometh surety in the presence of his friend. Prudence tells us that it is not wise to be surety for the debts of a friend. Do all you can to get out of it. Don't sleep until you do. And that's what we see. And let me just read Proverbs chapter 6, 1 through 5 again. And hopefully that this will all flow together very clearly. Then, my son, if thou be surety for thy friend, if thou hast stricken thy hands with a stranger, thou art snared with the words of thy mouth. Thou art taken with the words of thy mouth. Do this now, my son, and deliver thyself when thou art come into the hand of thy friend. Go humble thyself and make sure thy friend. Give not sleep to thine eyes, nor slumber to thy eyelids. Don't sleep until you do. Deliver thyself as a roe from the hand of the hunter, and as a bird from the hand of the fowler, where it's right there in their hand. Then you're taking it out of their hand where they can't get a hold of it. The Bible warns us, being surety for a friend or a stranger, it might seem the nice thing to do, but it might seem the nice thing to do. And I'm going to tell you the truth is, I believe a lot of times people can have all the good intentions. I don't necessarily think that pride has to be there, but I think it can very much be that way. But I mean, you could co-sign for a loan and have all good intention for that person. But I'll tell you what, you're not looking at all the red flags that are there. You're not looking at all the red flags that are there. You might be helping him. Excuse me. You might not be helping him. You may be enabling him. Did I really help that guy so that he would start paying his debt? Otherwise, they were going to foreclose. But I co-signed, and then they kind of reestablished it and made a new loan. And he never made one payment. I'm going to be honest with you. And I don't say this in anger or hatred toward the individual. It's just a plain fact. If he didn't pay to start with, don't think for a moment just because you put your signature on there. And let me say this also. This particular person had a problem with drugs. Now, what's more important? Making sure that old Larry Dolman doesn't have to pay his bills, doesn't have to pay his debt, or getting his fix. What do you think is going to be more important to a drug addict? You understand what I'm saying? That's just the truth. I mean, I'm just telling you some things I've had to learn the hard way. You're a lot better off not getting involved in these things. You might not be helping him. You might be enabling him to buy something that is not God's will for him to have. You know, I'll tell you what, if you don't save for it, and so on and so forth, if you don't have, why would you, if he should be established, he's old enough, why would you co-sign for somebody? You might be enabling him to be a spendthrift, where he doesn't ever learn how to manage his own money. You're not helping him. If he really wants that thing, something, go to work, get an extra job, save your money instead of spending it on everything else and living in the future anyway. I don't think it's a good idea to borrow money on everything anyway. I think it's better. You're going to be better off if you need a new car to be able to pay cash for it. If you can't pay cash for it, don't get it. He will never learn responsibility. If he defaults, you are the one who has paid his loan, and the property that you paid for is now his. It's not yours. You paid for it. It's not yours. It's his. This is what happens. This is a great recipe, for bitterness and the end of the friendship. Stop and make sure thy friend. Don't stop this thing if you can. Don't do it. If you said you would, Dad's saying to him, son, if you said you're going to do it, humble yourself. Stop this whole procedure right now. That's what you need to do. Getting involved in a friend's finances is a quick way to end a friendship. I remember a guy always used to say, I'm not the savings and loan. If you can't get it from the savings and loan, I'm not the savings and loan. I think that's the right attitude to have, to be quite frank with you. Don't come to me and ask for money. Don't do it. Because if you can't get it at the bank, why would I be the one giving it to you? Because you're not going to pay me. Financially, it's not wise. For financial wisdom, let's go to the ant, the old-fashioned way to make it. How about this? Old-fashioned hard work. That's what we all need to have. Proverbs 6:6-8. Go to the ant, thou sluggard. Why do people sometimes have financial problems? Old-fashioned laziness, drug addicts. Los Angeles County has been in the news lately, and it has the most homeless people in that county than any other place in the United States. Of course, Los Angeles is a very big city, I want you to understand. But I remember when I was in the Marine Corps, I was stationed out there, there was none of this homeless people in tents on all the streets like there is today. Now, let me ask you, why are people homeless in Los Angeles County? What's the biggest reason why people are homeless in Los Angeles? Drugs. They got a choice. Some of them have jobs, by the way. Some of them actually do have jobs. But the choice is, do I want a roof over my head that's not a tent, or do I want to have drugs? They make their choice of drugs. That's what they do. It's a bad thing. That's what they want to do. They're sluggards. They're lazy. A lot of times it's just plain old-fashioned laziness. Go to the ant. We can learn something from an ant. Sometimes ants are a lot smarter than what we are. Go to the ant, thou sluggard. Consider her ways. Be wise. Which having no guide, overseer, or ruler. I've known people that, let's say, for instance, that want to have a business. My goal is always to have a business. And again, I'm not against anybody having a business. But I'll tell you something right now. If you need a guide or an overseer or a ruler just to go to work, and you understand what I'm saying, if you don't even go to work on a regular job, How in the world are you ever going to make it having your own business? It's not going to happen. A lot of times businesses are started, like, well, I have to have a job until I get my business built up enough so that I have enough customers or whatever to actually make it where I don't have time to work anymore because I got so much to do. But I'm going to tell you what, if you get off work and you got stuff to do in your extra business out here, let me tell you something right now, and you decide, well, I'm tired, I think I'll just go to sleep. I'll tell you what, you can't do that. You learn from the ant, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler. If you don't have enough, drive to go and do things on your own without somebody cracking the whip on you, you're not going to be able to do it. The ant provideth her meat in the summer. Nobody has to tell it what to do. Nobody has to be, all those ants are carrying all these big things. Nobody has to make them do it. That's in them. I have to prepare this for the winter. Think about, just look around in nature even. Now is the time of the year. What do you see these squirrels doing? Who watches the squirrels? Maybe in the summertime you watch the ants, but in the fall, how about watching the squirrels? They're out there, they're preparing for winter. See, that's the way we need to be. We need to prepare ahead of time. We need to prepare ahead of time. The ant is always busy. Ants carry oversized loads, several times their own weight. The ant accomplishes much. I guarantee you, I remember when I was a kid reading about ants and stuff like that. They carry more their weight than any other type of a creature, I should say. So for their size and stuff, they are the strongest. Could you imagine someone like me carrying somebody like me around all day long? I can't even. No way. But they do that all day long. They're moving stuff. You see them pulling this and dragging this and all kinds of stuff. The ant has no guide. Nobody has to be. No other ant has to be. Yeah, none of that kind of stuff. Overseer or ruler. The ant doesn't have to have someone telling it what to do and when to do it. Ants routinely lay up stores for winter. The ant looks to the future. I guarantee you, if you want to have your own business, you have to look to the future. Because I'll tell you what, to start with, you're not going to have much. You have to look to the future. It's not just living for today. The sluggard is lazy, unmotivated, undisciplined. You got to be disciplined. If you work for somebody else, you got to be disciplined enough to get out of bed or get fired. Today, you probably get, with all the help you got, there was trouble getting there. You could probably be a bad worker and still today be there. But, it's kind of changed that way. But the sluggard is lazy, unmotivated, undisciplined. There were lazy people in Solomon's day. We see the same thing today. There's people that are just lazy. Learn from the ant. He looks to the future. He's motivated, disciplined, self-starter. Don't be one who lives for today and ignores tomorrow. Those who live for today and ignore tomorrow run into trouble when tomorrow comes. I think of the old, when I was reading this, I think of the old adage, make hay while the sun shines. Make sure you put tomorrow it might rain, so you better make sure you get that. It's ready to go. Do it. Get it up now. Tomorrow, the hay isn't that good if it gets rained on. So, you need to make hay while the sun shines. Work for today, save for tomorrow. Work for today, save for tomorrow. I believe these are things that the Lord would have us to do. Fools blow their money today. Wise men invest for tomorrow. These things we can learn from an ant. Again, Proverbs 6, 9 through 11. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou rise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. Well, I'm just going to sleep for a little bit here. But pretty soon you're going to be in poverty because tomorrow's going to come. Well, I'll do that tomorrow. You procrastinate. I'll do it tomorrow. I'm gonna rest. I'm too tired today. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands, so shall thy poverty come. I guarantee you, you're going to come. Especially when you look at it from an agricultural society. As one that traveleth. I remember the old thing, you can't farm in town. Have you ever heard that statement? You've heard that one, Tom, haven't you? You can't farm in town. Well, I mean, a lot of times farmers would be sitting in town, probably in the bar or something like that. I'm going to tell you something right now. You can't let things go and, well, I'm going to go to town this time. I got this other thing's more important. See, again, they were an agricultural society. You got to be there to do the work when it's ready to go. So shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth. And that was a saying when I was a kid anyway, you can't farm in town. You've heard that, Levon, haven't you? You haven't? I'll tell you, Steve, you were an old farmer. You ever hear that? You can't farm in town. That was an old saying. Yeah, you can't farm in town. That means you got to be out there to do the work. That's what it boils down to. And thy want as an armed man. Yeah, you're going to want as an armed man. The guy that he wants something all bad if he's going to be armed to get it. You're going to be lacking. You're going to be wanting, is what we see. So again, fools have no ambition. They need an overseer or a ruler in their lives. That's what you need. I think some people need to actually work for somebody else. I really believe that. I think if you have no drive, no ambition, you're better off working for somebody else. At least you got a paycheck coming in. That's the truth. So, fools have no ambition, no drive. They need an overseer or ruler in their lives. They don't do things without a boss. They want to sleep because they are up all hours of the night, a lot of times partying or whatever, involved in things of no value. In other words, again, what did old Benjamin Franklin say? I think it was old Ben, wasn't it? Early to bed, early to rise. Who remembers that one? Early to bed, early to rise makes a man healthy, wealthy, and wise. Did you learn that in school? Yeah, that was what I think it was. Wasn't that Benjamin Franklin said that? I think it was. That's a true statement. Early to bed, but early to rise. Get out there and do it. And you need to get some sleep. And that's what you really need to do. As long as they can get by today, why worry about tomorrow? This will lead to poverty and even crime. That's what it's going to be. It will lead to poverty and crime. That's what we're seeing in our society today. People ripping things off. And now there's even laws out there. If it's under $1,000, they're not even going to prosecute you. This is the kind of stuff that's happening in some of our big cities. But laziness and stuff leads to crime. Go out and get a job. Be honest in your living. Learn from the ant. We see in our society today homeless, like those living in the streets in tents. Remember, the flesh lives to indulge itself now. Say, well, we need to learn to not indulge ourselves now, but to not indulge ourselves, to deny ourselves, and really look to the future. I believe the future in this life, obviously someday you're going to be older. You're not going to have the money. You're not going to have the physical capabilities of making the money that you make now. So what do you need to do? The wise man that has learned from the ant and has prepared for winter, he has reaped a bountiful harvest. He has been prudent with the things which the Lord has given him. The Bible teaches hard work and being a good steward of God, what God has given, and being rich toward God. These are things that the Bible teaches. What you need to be is a hard worker. You need to save up. You need to be rich toward God. These are things. You need to be a good steward of what God has given. I think too many people live from paycheck to paycheck because they cannot control their indulgences. They want to indulge. They got to have this now. They got to have that now. And because of it, they never think about tomorrow. Learn from the ant. Tomorrow's going to come. Tomorrow's going to come. Or something may come, winter may come, and the furnace may go out. The hot water heater may go out. You might need to shingle your roof or whatever. There's different things that might come up that you have to do. The car breaks down. When the car breaks down, you ought to have the money to pay for it, to fix it. That's what we see. Lay up treasures in heaven where moth and rust doth not corrupt, where thieves do not break through and steal. We need to be rich toward God. We need to be thrifty, not indulge ourselves now, but prepare for winter. That's what we need to do. We also need to be concerned about, something? I'm going to be judged on what did I do with what God gave me. We're going to be judged by those things. Was I a good steward? See, really everything's His anyway. Am I a good steward of what God has given to me? And if we'd look at it that way, I believe we wouldn't have a problem with these things. Really learn from the ant. Prepare for winter. Learn from the squirrels out there today too. I mean, any animal prepares. They know that stuff's coming. Levon and me were talking the other day about they hiding these nuts and stuff. How they figure out where them things are at in the winter. God must have put something in to figure out, stuff like that. But they're preparing for winter. Make sure that we do the same thing. Let's be wise. That's what we've looked at today as prudence as far as finances are concerned. Don't co-sign. Don't be the savings and loan for people. And I'll tell you what, work. Learn from the ant. Be thrifty, save. Don't indulge yourself. Don't indulge yourself. Anyway, let's go to the Lord in prayer. And again,